Hello everybody, and welcome back to another video. In today's video, we'll be taking a look at the 2024 House elections, and I'll be providing you all with an update on these races. I'll be explaining my current predictions for the House elections, and this will be the last time I make a House prediction before, of course, the final prediction, which will come, I believe, 2 days before the election. So, with that being said, everyone who's not new here knows these House videos tend to take a while, which is why I've filled out the seats that we don't really want to talk about. These are going to be the safe and likely seats. I will characterize a few more likely seats, but at the very least, I'll talk about them. So with that, as we always do, we're going to go in geographical order. And we've got ourselves a really tight race in Maine's 2nd District to start out with. I mean, this race is going to be very close. And if we take a look at the polling data, we've seen a shift towards the GOP. Now, in the most recent poll we had from mid-September, Pan Atlantic Research, 398 likely voters, they found Jared Golden, the Democratic incumbent, down by 3% to Terry Alt, who's the Republican candidate here, who initially I think was running kind of a lower profile race, but has since, again, as we can see in the one nonpartisan poll we have, taken a pretty good lead. Now, I do want to wait for more polling. I'm going to put Golden as the slight favorite right now, just because he's the incumbent and he's won in these races before, and he won in 2020 when I think ticket splitting was quite bad across the country for Democrats in Trump areas. But I actually do anticipate that I could move this seat back or, towards the Republicans. I just want more polling and more confirmation of Golden potentially being down in this race. So with that, we're going to go over to Connecticut, where Jahana Hayes in the 5th Congressional District is running a semi-competitive race. We do have a couple of polling here, a couple of polls here, but again, they're a bit old, and I think these polls are from last year. Now, what we do know is that, this poll is from this year, but this poll is from last year. Obviously, the poll from last year had Hayes up by 2, but it's a GOP internal, and then Emerson had Hayes up by 3. I'm going to go with that. I think she'll win by 4 or 5. Again, this is a seat Biden won by 10 points in 2020. Even if Harris does a bit worse this year, which is difficult to envision, I actually think she'll do better here than Biden did. Either way, I would expect Jahana Hayes to hold on. Now, Long Island, we've got some interesting races. So the district we're going to talk about, I believe, is going to be actually coincidentally the 1st Congressional District, which is this longer Long Island seat. It's likely going to go red, but I'm just checking to make sure we don't have any polling. Actually, we do have polling. We have a couple of polls. Nice. So we have 2 GOP polls that show the race pretty solidly in favor of the Republicans. Lolota up by 10 in the Signal poll, and then Fabrizio had him up by 8. I think that's a fair estimate. Maybe he'll win by a bit less, but Long Island's getting pretty Republican leaning. It's trending right. All the state polls in New York show she'll win the state, obviously, but all the state polls show her doing worse than Joe Biden in 2020. In down ballot, that's going to hurt Democratic candidates. Now, the good news for Democrats is that I think their chances are better in some of these other seats. So first of all, I'm going to say Tom Suozzi wins in the 3rd district. He won his special election by 7 points in February of 2024. Again, Democrats feel pretty good here. Republicans, I think, were really hurt by the George Santos scandals. It could make voters pretty distrustful of them in this region. We tend to see, I think we could see kind of like a regionalized within this district, like blue, Democratic shift as a result of Santos. But the truly competitive seat on Long Island is the 4th district, which voted for Biden by 14 points in 2020, but has really been, pretty difficult for Democrats since then, with Kathy Hochul losing this seat at the gubernatorial level and Republicans winning it in the congressional race. Now, what you'll see is that I think we have 2 polls here, and they've been internal. Actually, you have a couple. They've been internals, and they all kind of show the result that the candidate wants. In the Republican internals, Despacito wins. In the Democratic internals, Gillen is winning. So it doesn't tell us a whole lot. What I will say is I'm going to give this one to Gillen, by the slimmest of advantages, just because at this point in time, as someone who lives actually in this media market around this area, I have, been exposed to the advertising. I've seen ads for both Despacito and Gillen. I'm familiar with both the campaigns and how they're being run. I'm not a huge fan of anecdotal evidence, but what I will say is that I think the Gillen campaign has been a bit more on message than Despacito's has. And it's really been run on combating extremism and running on abortion, which is obviously a winning issue for Democrats in this region. Another big trend this election is suburban voters, obviously, right? I think especially white suburban voters, the polls have been very good for Harris and Democrats with these voters. They show a positive trend for Democrats. This is a suburban seat. It's not super left-trending, but there are a good amount of white suburban voters here that I think voted for, have voted for Republicans in these congressional elections, could swing just enough to help Gillen. I also think Harris is going to win this seat by 9 or 10 points, less than Biden, but certainly enough to carry Gillen over the finish line. Because again, in 2022, Democrats did not even win the seat at the top of the ticket. So that's all to say that. Now, in the 17th district, Mike Lawler, I believe, is on his way to winning re-election. It will be close. I think I'm calling it about a 2-point victory right now. But this district has been bad for Democrats, and they've really struggled in the nonpartisan polling. Emerson had Lawler up by 1. Even Mondaire Jones's internals, have Lawler up by 2 and 3. And again, we actually had a Mondaire Jones internal from August that had him down by 7. I don't even know why he released this, to be honest. But no good indicators for Democrats. This is a left-trending seat, and I think Harris is going to do fine here. But Lawler, unlike Anthony D'Esposito, I think has actually done a good job of branding himself. I also live in the media market. I live in the media market for a bunch of these competitive New Jersey, New York, Connecticut seats. And I can tell you that I think that the campaign Lawler's been running is of superior quality to the campaign that D'Esposito's been running. He's, I think, been able to brand himself as more of a moderate. He's really, stressed that in his campaign for re-election this year, and I think he's going to win once again by a narrow margin. Now, in Pat Ryan's district, this is a seat Democrats should win. The 18th, I don't actually think we have a ton of polling here. We have, we have one poll, I think, actually, or we have two. We had we had a GOP poll that showed it as a tied race, and then we had the nonpartisan poll from Emerson having Bryan up by 5. I'll say he wins by 4 or 5. This seat, to me, again, it's left trending. A lot of white voters there who are moving towards the Democratic Party. It's broadly a pro-choice district, broadly, I'd say, somewhat socially liberal. That bodes well for Democrats, even if they do poorly at the top of the ticket. Now, Mark Molinaro, on the other hand, in the 19th district up here, we've gotten some good polls for Josh Riley. Actually, RMG, which did get a sponsor, but this is nonpartisan. They had Riley up by 3, but with a lot of undecided voters. The internal polls, Riley's internals had him up by 3. Molinaro's from July had him up by 9. I'm going to pick Molinaro to win. I feel pretty good about this. Again, the thing with this district is that Democrats do need a really high turnout from, because this isn't, obviously this district does, I think, have a lot of swingy areas, but it's also a turnout seat in the sense that Democrats are going to really want to turn out their voters in order to overcome the Republican advantage that exists in the rural central part of the seat. And in New York, we know that that Kamala Harris, I think, is likely to do worse than Biden at the top of the ticket. And this is the type of seat where that hurts Democrats because they're not going to get the turnout they need, and Republicans are. Molinaro is also an incumbent, relatively popular, and he won in 2022 in a seat that was actually a bit bluer. It's been redrawn now. So I'm going to call him the favorite at this moment. I could move it back before Election Day, but I'm indicating some degree of confidence by putting it in lean. Now, let's talk about the 22nd district. Mannion versus Brandon Williams, the GOP incumbent. What we have seen is that John Mannion has a lead in the one poll that's been released. It was a Democratic poll, which makes me feel a bit nervous about calling this race. But I'm going to put it in the lean Democratic column. The seat got a couple points bluer. Brandon Williams won by just over a point in 2022 in a redder environment, in a redder seat. To me, that's enough to call him the underdog here. But this seat, I think, is to me the least interesting in upstate New York. I'm much more interested in watching Lawler, Molinaro, and Ryan, because these are all incumbents who are going to, really have to fight, and then as well as D'Esposito in the 4th district. Now, New Jersey 7, Democrats have really, really been paying more attention to this one because of Sue Altman, who had a pretty good, a pretty, not good, but I think a pretty viral debate moment where she said, House Democrats are not helping me, with the funding I need to win this race. And again, recent polling has showed it to be somewhat close for Democrats. These are Democratic internal polls, but the past two have showed it as a 2-point race. This is a left-trending seat. It's mostly a white district. Kamala Harris, I think, is actually going to do quite well in New Jersey. She might not do well in New York, but she'll do well in New Jersey. And again, when we talk about the type of seat where Republicans are likely to underperform this year, with Trump on the ballot, with abortion rising in salience, with, Democratic turnout being a bit higher than it was in 2022, this is that exact type of seat. Tom Keene only won by about 1.5 points in 2022, which was a lot less than a lot of people were expecting. He did run against a Democratic incumbent. Now he's the incumbent. That'll help him. But to me, this race is an underrated pickup opportunity for Democrats. It's a very close race. I'm going to put it in the GOP column just because the two Democratic polls still show Keene ahead. He's now the incumbent, and he has a huge money advantage. But again, at this point in time, if we see Democrats outperform by even a couple points in suburban seats, this is going to be one of the first to go for the Republicans. Now, I just realized I had Matt Cartwright's seat as safe. Let's talk about Matt Cartwright's seat, actually. Let's do it. This is kind of the opposite of New Jersey 7. This is a district that, again, I believe we actually have 1 or 2 polls here. Oh, actually, no, we don't. We only have polls in the 7th. So we're going off my knowledge here. This district, it's a Trump-leaning seat. Trump's going to win it again. It's Scranton. It's an area where Democrats have been doing poorly in recent years, but Cartwright's been able to hold on. Now, in 2022, the problem for him is that in 2022, Democrats had a bit of a revival in this district because they won. Obviously, Josh Shapiro and John Fetterman did quite well statewide, and Harris might win Pennsylvania, right? I think it's a clear toss-up state, the presidential race, but she won't win it by the amount Fetterman won it by. Now, Bob Casey on the ballot will help. I think Casey's going to actually win this seat by, the skin of his teeth. That'll help Cartwright, so that's why I think he's actually going to win, which might surprise some people. I'm being kind of bold here by predicting Cartwright to win. But to me, the real problem here for Republicans is that, right, Matt Cartwright's a popular incumbent. We don't have a lot of polling here. I think Republicans would have released a poll if they found themselves ahead at this point in time against an incumbent Democrat. Again, the early vote, the mail-in return rates from Scranton are, among the best in the state for Democrats. And Harris will lose the seat, but to me, Matt Cartwright's good enough to overcome it one last time. Susan Wild in the 7th district, we actually have some polling here. We actually have a good amount. And what we've seen is that the poll looks pretty, the polling looks pretty grim for Ryan McKenzie, who in his own internals is down by 2. Democratic internals have it a 4-point race for Wild. And then the interesting thing is that the Muhlenberg College poll actually had Wild up by 6. I like Muhlenberg. They're a good local pollster. I don't think she'll win by 6, but I think she'll win by half of that. And this is, again, a left-trending seat. I actually do expect Harris to win this seat narrowly at the top of the ticket. So, yeah, call me, I suppose, higher on Democrats in the consensus in western and eastern Pennsylvania. Now, Scott Perry's seat. I've been calling this seat a sleeper for, I think, like a year, and people are starting to pick up on it. Janelle Stelson actually, has led in more polls than Scott Perry, who's the GOP incumbent here. And even in June, this is before Harris, was even being considered. This is before the debate between Biden and Trump. We saw a Franklin and Marshall College poll. This is a nonpartisan, pretty high-quality local pollster. They had Perry up by 1 in this district. And now, most recent nonpartisan poll, Susquehanna, Janelle Stelson up by 9. She is crushing Perry in this poll. Now, I think that's a bit of an outlier, even though we don't have a lot of polls. I'm going to call it an outlier. But this race to me is really interesting. I'm tempted to put it in the tilt column, but I don't think it's a toss-up just yet because I do expect Trump to do well here. But again, this is the type of seat that could trend left. And if Democrats were investing more money here, if they were giving it as much attention as they're giving some of these other competitive seats, I'd actually, see the case for Janelle Stelson being the favorite in at this point in time. I'm going to put it in the lean Republican column, but I can certainly see some interesting things happening here. Now, in the 17th district, I don't have a lot to say here. We have a couple polls. They're both Democratic polls. DeLuzio being only up by 4 is not good for him. I'm going to put it in the lean column, but I think he'd win by a bit more at the end of the day. Now, going over to Maryland, David Trone is retiring, or he retired to run for Senate. He lost his primary. He's now going to be out of Congress for the foreseeable future. This is not Maryland's 10th. This is Maryland's 6th district. Excuse me. So what's interesting here is that I expect April Delaney to win this race, but the only nonpartisan polls that we have, have had her losing to Neil Parrott, the Republican. I'll put this in lean. This is a Biden plus 10 seat. She might actually underperform Biden by Harris by a good amount. But this is kind of a weird one where I want more data before I make a bold take. Now, Virginia 7th. Democrats have not been doing that well here. This seat I think has become a bit of a problem for them because their candidate, their candidate Eugene Vindman has, I think, not run the campaign Democrats wanted him to. We've seen Derek Anderson's polling. Derek Anderson, not to be confused with the former NFL backup quarterback. Sorry, I just had to drop that here. The polling here for the Anderson's release has showed consistently pretty close races with a lot of undecided voters. That'll be enough for Vindman to win, but this race shouldn't be that close. This is a left-trending seat that Biden won by 7. Harris could win by even more, but Virginia as a whole seems to be kind of weird right now, and Democrats haven't really gotten out of their slump here just yet, so expect this race to be closer than you might have originally anticipated. Now, in Virginia's 2nd district, this is a race that has gotten away from Democrats quite quickly. I'm moving this into the lean Republican column. Again, Jen Kagan's the GOP incumbent. Even in Democratic polls, she's up by 4. I have no problem calling her the favorite here. Again, this is only a seat that Biden won by 2 in 2020. Harris, I think, will win it again, But again, Democrats need the coalition of suburban white voters as well as black voters, who I think Democrats need good turnout from to win back this district. It's possible, but without an incumbent, it's pretty hard to do. And in 2022, Democrats lost it. Jen Higgins is now an incumbent. I think she's been, run a pretty strong campaign. And for that, I expect her to be rewarded in November. Let's go to North Carolina now. We've got one competitive seat. We actually have a good amount of polling here. And it's really, in that first district, it's between Davis and Buckhout. And the interesting thing about the polls is that the polls show Davis ahead by comfortable margins, and his own internal polling has him up by double digits. I'm going to say he's going to win narrowly. I actually do think Kamala Harris has a chance to lose this district at the top of the ticket because I don't think she's going to do all that well in North Carolina as a whole. But again, at this point in time, right, the fact that Republicans are getting crushed so poorly in the governor's race, Democrats have a huge advantage on the ground there. Again, Trump will help Republicans stay competitive here, but the polls are just too much for me to ignore at this point. Now let's go down to Florida. First of all, let's talk about Jared Moskowitz's seat. This is the 23rd district. I actually don't think we have any polls here. I'm just going to double check because I don't, remember every poll that I see. We don't have any polls. Good. Okay. So to me, this seat is bordered between lean and likely. Biden won it by double digits in 2020. It's going to trend right. I think Trump's going to come within, 6 or 7 points of winning it. But Jared Moskowitz is the incumbent, and Republicans haven't really, made a play to beat him yet. So kind of a sleeper flip. But in 2022, Republicans did about as well as you possibly could have expected them to do statewide in Florida, and Moskowitz still won. Now, in St. Petersburg, this is just outside of Tampa, in a competitive district. The 13th district, the polls have not been, too reassuring for Anna Paulina Luna, who's the GOP incumbent. We have seen in her own internal poll, she's up by 5 as of August 29th. And then we had the only nonpartisan poll in the race that dropped from St. Pete polls had her down by 4. Now, St. Pete polls isn't a great pollster, but it is telling that they're nonpartisan and they have her losing to her Democratic challenger. What's interesting to me, though, is that she has recently, pivoted to the center. She's, kind of said, look, I'm going to work with Joe Biden. I appreciate what Joe Biden's done for the people of this region. So she's really just pivoted totally away from the more conservative stances she was taking in 2022, which is a sign that I think she's not confident she's going to win. She's still likely to win. Again, this is a seat that Trump won by 6 points in 2020, and it's not right trending, but it's also not super left trending. So Luna will win re-election, but the fact that it's close, I think, is not a good sign for Republicans in general in the suburbs. Now let's go to Ohio. We're going to go up to the Midwest now. So we're going to start by taking a look at the 13th congressional district, where Democrats actually kind of had a bit of an upset victory in 2022. The only poll we have was from July, and it is a Republican poll that shows Sykes ahead. I'll call her the favorite just right now because obviously Sherrod Brown on the ballot is going to help, and Republicans in the summer had themselves down here. But not too much to say about this race. It's a narrow Harris seat that actually trended right in 2020, so we could definitely see a bit of an upset happening here. Now in the 9th district, Marcy Copter just keeps holding on. In the Inside Elections poll we got from July, she was up by 10 points. I don't think she'll win by that much, but it's pretty clear she has the advantage at this point in time. Now, let's go to Michigan. This state is going to be interesting. We've got a lot of competitive House races, a lot of open seats that Democrats are worried about. We're going to start off, I suppose, in the whoa, hold on. I just need to characterize this. In the 7th district, where Alessa Slotkin, vacated, to run for Senate, and I think she'll likely actually carry the seat in the Senate race. But the latest polls show Tom Barrett leading in this district. And Tom Barrett has run multiple times for the seat before. He didn't beat Slotkin either time, but now I think he's got his chance, and he's leading in the polls. The Inside Elections poll was really concerning for Democrats. They had Barrett up by 7. I don't think Barrett will win by 7, but I do think at this point he's probably favored. And that's a concern for Democrats. This is a seat that, Slotkin won by 6 points in 2022. Democrats have done well here the past 2 years, and it looks like they're, seeing their strength recede a little bit. Now, in the 8th district, we do have some better news for Democrats. It looks like a closer race between Kirsten McDonald, Rivet, and Paul Jungay. Now, what's interesting here is that this poll was commissioned by Democrats, and they're still down, which I think is a concern for them, which is why I'm going to put it in the tilt Republican column. But this also is a seat that I think, a lot of people are really understating Democratic support in, just because of how right-trending it is. A lot of people expect this seat to just, keep moving to the right. And in 2020, we saw Biden kind of hold his ground here. So, it's certainly an interesting seat. I think Harris is kind of 50-50 to carry it presidentially. Actually, if I had to bet, she would lose it, but the seats also blew her down ballot. So this, to me, is a pure toss-up that I'll give to the Republicans for now. Now, in Michigan's 10th congressional district, let's talk about it. John James versus Karl Marlinga. Democrats in 2022 came within a couple thousand votes of flipping it, or of actually holding this seat with Karl Marlinga, but he was outspent by a crazy ratio, I think like 11-1 or something, which makes it pretty hard to win. Democrats are funding him now, and we've seen some pretty good polls for Karl Marlinga. He leads John James by 6 in the Deadline Detroit poll. Now, bad news for him is that in the Democratic-sponsored poll from August, he was down by 3. But this is a close race, and I think the fact that Democrats are spending money here is going to help them, while at the same time Gretchen Whitmer not being in the ballot is going to hurt. So consider me skeptical of Democrats here for now, because this, to me is a pure toss-up, but we'll see. We'll definitely see. Now, Republicans. In the 4th district, we don't have any polling here, but this is a Trump plus 4 seat. It's pretty left trending. Democrats did pretty poorly here in 2022, but this area is also a lot redder down ballot. I think that they're actually going to win it by maybe just over 5% this year, or Republicans are. Indiana, this is actually a seat that I remember getting wrong in 2022, full disclosure. Indiana's 1st congressional district, this is Frank Mervin. We don't have any polling there, which is unfortunate, but for now, I'm going to say Mervin's going to win just because he won in 2022, and Democrats had pretty bad turnout from the more the more Democratic parts of this district, right? Like up north in Gary, Indiana, where Democrats need to do well to hold on. So it's definitely close. It's definitely right trending. Trump actually has a decent chance to come close to carrying it this year. But that's all I have to say. Mervin's the incumbent, and he did well enough in 2022. I'll call him the slight favorite as of right now. Now, Wisconsin's 3rd district. I think this is a seat that Democrats should really be spending money in, but they haven't done that yet. This is obviously Derek Van Orden versus Rebecca Cook, and the latest Democratic poll had Cook up by 1. It was a very, very interesting poll because we didn't have a lot of undecided voters, but at the same time, we've seen Republican polls. They've shown their own candidate ahead, so this is a pretty close race. I'm actually going to go out on a limb and call it a toss-up-esque race. I'm going to give Derek Van Orden the advantage here because I actually think Democrats are going to do better than people think in rural Wisconsin or in working class regions of Wisconsin. They are in working class regions of Michigan, but again, it's certainly one of those districts where a lot of things can happen. In 2022, Republicans had a huge spending advantage here, and they only won by I think 3.5. So crazier things have happened, but I do think I'd rather be the Republicans at this point. Now, Iowa, the polls here have not been good for the Republicans in general. I mean, if we just take a look at the Selzer poll now, state top line, they only Trump up by 6, and obviously in Iowa's, I think this is the 1st district. Let's see here. Yeah, or no, this is the 3rd district actually, which is the seat that Zach Nunn beat out Democratic incumbent Sidney Axne in 2022. We've seen the polls be very good for Lane and Backham, and we actually saw the latest poll that was nonpartisan from RMG had him up by 3. Now, this is a seat that I actually kind of happy to see being competitive, not because I have any partisan interest in this. At least publicly, but because my model in July picked up on the seat actually and had it flipping to Democrats for some reason. I was like, wait a minute, that doesn't make any sense. Trump won this seat. My model saw something. I don't know what it was, and I couldn't figure it out because I was like, nothing but the seat sticks out to me as flipping blue. But it's competitive. For now, I'm going to put it in the Republican column because polls in Iowa have been pretty bad, and because again, Republicans have an incumbent here, and Trump's going to win the state. All that. But certainly an interesting race. Now, I do want to talk about the 1st district, which is where Marinette Miller-Meeks actually trailed in a Democratic poll to Christina Bohannon. But again, it's a Democratic poll. Polling in Iowa is not great, and I think Democrats could be releasing some of these polls to tactically make it seem as though they are in competitive races here, maybe to get Republicans to spend. I'm not sure. I'm going to put it in the lean Republican column, but it's certainly going to be interesting. Now, Nebraska's 2nd district. This is a really interesting one. Don Bacon versus Tony Vargas. In 2022 was a 1-point race. Bacon won, but this time around it looks like it's not headed in that direction. So if we take a look, hold on, wait a minute. Yeah, it's 2024. I was like, wait a minute. Okay, so what's interesting here is that I just want to make sure that I don't have any, hold on. Now I'm paranoid that I had the wrong polls for Iowa's 1st district here. Because I just want to double check this because I don't want to. Okay, there we go. Yeah, it was Bohannon versus Miller-Meeks, and I was concerned for a second because I know she ran in 2022. Anyways, let's get back to Nebraska. I just wanted to double check myself. Nebraska 2nd district. Don Bacon looks like he is on track to lose re-election at this point. And that's because of a couple reasons. First is that we actually have high quality polls in this race. Like, this is like the most polled House race in the country. NYT Siena has him down by 3. CNN has him down by 6. Democratic polls have him down by 8 and 4. And then Survey USA split ticket, which is, a big fan of this. Vargas down by 6, or Vargas up by 6. I'm going to put in the lean Democratic column. It's certainly a bold take at this point because Bacon's still the incumbent, and generally people don't like to pick against incumbents outright. I'm doing it. The seat is left trending. Harris is going to win it by, I think, 8 or 9 points. Don Bacon in 2022 won by less than expected in a year where Republicans actually won, did very well in this district locally. This time around, without that advantage at the top of the ticket for the Republicans, I expect Bacon to go down by 3 to 4 points. Now, Illinois' 17th district, I'm going to put this in the tilt Democratic column for now. Again, Democratic incumbent. This seat's going to be, quite close, I would say. But Democrats are going to do just well enough to hold on. This is a working class seat. Not too much to say here. Missouri 2nd district I only brought up because I think Republicans could do worse than expected. Again, this is a district that is pretty left trending. It's in the suburbs of St. Louis. And Josh Hawley is actually going to do quite poorly here. But again, at the same time, right, like, it's still a Trump-leaning seat, and Ann Wagner is a good incumbent for the GOP. Now, let's go over to Texas, where we've got a couple interesting seats. So first, Texas 15, this is a Trump plus 3 seat that's rapidly right trending. I just want to mention it because it's kind of like the classic case study of can Democrats improve with Hispanic voters? I don't think they're going to, but just thought I'd bring that up because this is a Trump-leaning majority Hispanic seat. But let's go to these other seats that are going to be more competitive. Texas, let's talk about, we'll start with the 20... we don't have any 28 polls. All right, we'll start with the 34th district, where, again, we have Mayra Flores versus Vicente Gonzalez in this election. And, the thing here is that we've gotten a couple polls in this race. They're all from Republicans, and they kind of show some mixed result. Flores is up by 1 in the May poll, but then later on they had Gonzalez up by 3. I'm going to call Gonzalez the favorite, but again, polling in this area has historically been pretty bad. And then obviously Henry Cuellar in the 28th district will likely win. He won by, I think, 13 points in 2022. I'll call him the favorite there. So yeah, with that being said, let's move on to the western part of the country. We're going to wrap it up here soon. So first of all, I am tired. I characterized the wrong Nebraska district. Let's talk about and I said Nebraska. I meant to say Colorado. Genuinely, what am I doing? So Colorado, let's talk about the 3rd district, which is where Lauren Boebert was the incumbent, but she obviously is going to run in this district now, which actually helps Republicans. Adam Frisch, the Democrat, I think raised a lot of money because people thought he was going to go up against Boebert, and he ended up, not being able to do that. The Republicans are going to hold on to this seat. In 2022, Boebert got really caught off guard, and Democrats actually won the seat at the governor or the gubernatorial level. With all of that being said, it's pretty easy to see why it kind of was like the perfect storm for Democrats to have a surprise flip. Boebert, is not a good candidate, not a well-liked incumbent. She carpetbagged to this district over here. It's a lot redder, and she'll win. Now Republicans are going to run a better candidate, and without that, kind of sneak attack that Democrats ran here in 2022, it's going to likely stay Republican, at least for the time being. In the 4th district, the 4th, we have got, the 8th district. What am I saying? We have Yadira Caraveo, who has led by 3 in the most recent local poll. She was tied in Emerson, which isn't great for her as an incumbent. We'll put this in tilt, but this is Colorado's a left-trending state, and the Democratic Party has done well here in recent elections. Republicans haven't been able to really pick up a lot of steam here, and that's why I think the seat's going to stay with the Democrats, but the fact that the polls are close is not a great sign for them. Now, we've gotten a couple polls in New Mexico's 2nd district. Let's talk about it. It's going to be Gabe Vasquez versus, I'm blanking on the name, Yvette Harrell, who's the, former Republican representative for this district. She lost to Vasquez in 2022. The problem, though, is that she's no longer the incumbent, and if we take a look at the polling data in this district, nonpartisan polls do not show good news for Harrell. Emerson had her down by 10, and she was down by 9 in Survey USA. She was up earlier in an early Survey USA poll, so I don't know how they got this big of a shift in like 2 weeks, but, it's one of those things you kind of just have to account for. It won't be a 10-point victory for Vasquez, maybe like a third of that, or maybe even a quarter of that, but this is a seat that Democrats are likely to do well in this year, and Vasquez, now as the incumbent, has that under his belt. And again, Vasquez in 2022 won this district when Republicans won it at the governor level. Harris will likely win this district, even if it's only by a couple points. Now, let's talk about Arizona. I forgot to characterize the second district. But let's talk about the first district now. This is a suburban seat. It's right outside of Phoenix. You got a lot of moderate voters here. And what we've seen is that Democrats have done well here. Again, Amish Shah, who is, I believe, the name of the Democratic candidate, running against David Schweikert, who's the longtime incumbent here. Schweikert got caught off guard in 2022. He was expected to win by 4 to 5. He only won by about 0.8%. And now Shah led in the most recent poll. Again, it was a Democratic poll, but, still worth noting. Now, what's interesting here is that, Shah, I think, has not been a great candidate for Democrats, and that's why I'm going to give it to the Republicans, because they have a bit of a cash advantage here, and also because Democrats in the polls in this district, or in Arizona as a whole, have not done well. This is the state that Harris is, I think, polling the worst in compared to expectations, as of all the swing states, right? That's going to help Schweikert. We also have to consider the fact that Shah, again, even in his own polls, is only up by 1. So, he has leads, but they're not amazing leads. Now, the good news for Democrats is that in the 6th district, Juan Ciscomani, the GOP incumbent, is not doing too well. We had a poll from July that was Democratic sponsored that had it as a competitive race, which to me doesn't mean that he's going to lose, but does show he's in a race that's pretty close. Both these seats are going to be, coming down to the wire. I think Republicans are going to hold on to them, but it will be very interesting to watch. Now, let's go to Nevada. We've got 3 competitive districts in Nevada, but the good news for us is that we can kind of, kill 3 birds with 1 stone, right? If we take a look at the polling here, it's been pretty good for the Democratic Party. Horsford, Susie Lee, Donatitis, they all have double-digit leads. I think they're all in the lean column. I'm going to be cautious here. But again, in 2022, they all won, and Democrats had pretty bad turnout at the top of the ticket in 2022. So let's go over to Montana. Democrats were initially hopeful they'd be able to win the first district. They were hoping they could run Steve Bullock. He didn't run. They were hoping John Tester could carry the district at the top of the ticket. That might not even happen. But let's just talk about it. Monica Tranel is running against Ryan Zinke, who's the incumbent Republican. We got a GOP poll just, I think, 2 days ago that had Zinke up by 8. I don't think he'll win by that much, but the nonpartisan polls, show him ahead by a good amount. Even the Democratic polls can't find a lead for Tranel. To me, this is a race that Democrats have really, blundered, and Montana as a whole has been disappointing for Democrats this cycle. So, that's going to be interesting to watch. Now, let's go to Oregon for a second. We're going to come back to Washington because that race is just so interesting. Let's talk about Oregon. Jamie McLeod Skinner was the Democrat who ran here in 2022. She ran again in 2024. She lost the primary to Janelle Bynum, who in the latest poll leads Lori Chavez DeRemer. Now, the good news for Bynum is that in the latest polls, we have her ahead of Chavez DeRemer, who's the GOP incumbent with a lot of undecided voters. So it's going to be close. I'm going to give Democrats the slightest of advantages here just because this is a left-running seat. And in 2022, Chavez DeRemer won by about 2%. When Democrats lost the seat by, I think, 4 or 5 at the gubernatorial level. So to me, it's worth noting. And it's really, I think, Chavez DeRemer's a good incumbent, maybe not as good as we think, and that will be enough for Bynum to win this race. Now, Washington 3rd District, I have so many thoughts on this seat, but just to condense them here, I'm tempted to do a longer term or longer, like form videos here on some of these House races, but let's talk about it as quickly as we can. Let's talk about the latest nonpartisan polls, which, of course, there are none. I thought there was one for some reason, but there are none. So let's talk about the internals. Good news for Marie Gluesenkamp-Perez is that in the latest Joe Kent internal from June, she was up by 4. But since then, we've gotten some Democratic polls that have a tied race. And on top of that, we do know that in June, Democratic polls had Kent up by 1. So it's kind of all over the place. I'm going to call, Gluesenkamp-Perez the favorite for one reason, and that is obviously that incumbency factor. Incumbents do well the second time around. Joe Kent has not been able to raise money necessary to compete in this race. He's going to come close to winning. Trump's going to actually help him in the seat because Trump's going to win the district by a couple of points. But again, it's left-right enough where there's going to be just enough Trump voters who are going to vote for Marie Gluesenkamp-Perez because Kent has obviously been characterized as an unelectable Republican. He's been labeled as extreme by Gluesenkamp-Perez, and that worked quite effectively for her in 2022. And I think there's be a lot of Trump voters who maybe don't want to vote for Harris, but want a check on Trump or want to. I think Democrats made abortion a key issue here too as well. Like I think some voters could want to express the abortion issue in a way that doesn't hurt Trump presidentially. So that'll be a factor in some of these suburban seats all over the country, by the way. But it's relevant here because Democrats have ran on abortion. Let's go through California. So We'll start in is that the 13th district? Yes, it's the 13th district. Adam Gray against John Duarte. This is a rematch of 2022 where Duarte won by 600 votes. And this was, I think, a race that Republicans only won because of bad turnout. What we've seen is that the nonpartisan poll from the UCs, they had Gray up by 1, which is a good sign for him. Again, polls are pretty inaccurate in this region of California. They haven't been great in the past, but again, Democrats would have won this seat if Hispanic turnout was even 5% better in 2022. And that's all to say that, look, even the slightest of increases in turnout will help Democrats here. Let's go to the 3rd district. I think Republicans are going to win here just quickly. Kevin Kiley, he's the GOP incumbent in this race, who, again, I believe is a pretty good incumbent. He did well in 2022. He won by 5 points. And this time around, he's likely to win by a bit less because this is a left-running district, but Democrats haven't really invested here. Let's go. Actually, I'm just going to fill out a few more of these SoCal seats just kind of while we're at it, because I don't want to spend too much time talking about these because these videos get so unbelievably long, and I'm misclicking left and right here. But yeah, so Democrats 215, GOP 214. It's going to come down to the wire, guys. California 22. This is, again, similar to California 13. This is it's a right-trending Hispanic seat, right-trending majority Hispanic seat where Democrats have, come up just short in recent years. And what we've seen is that Rudy Salas, the Democrat, has closed the gap in the polls. Emerson Azamat actually had a tied race, and the UC poll had him up by 4. But David Valadao, he's tested, tried and true in this region. He's been able to win a couple of times. I'm actually going to give him the win here. This might be kind of a hot take at this point because the conventional wisdom has, shifted in favor of Rudy Salas. But what we're seeing is that the Democratic Party has not been able to, I think, fix their problem with Hispanic voters, Hispanic men in specific, and Kamala Harris will not do well enough in this part of the state to boost David Valadao. Again, Valadao won a Biden plus 11 district in 2020 on that same ballot by around 2% over a Democratic incumbent. If he can do that, he can really do anything, really. So to me, that's going to be the deciding factor here. Now, let's go to California. So what's interesting about California is that we have just a bunch of seats in SoCal that could really decide things. I'll go from easiest to hardest. The easiest is going to be the 45th district where Katie Porter, was the incumbent. Or no, that's the 40. That's the, excuse me. I meant to say the 50. I think it's the 47th. What am I doing? So Dave Min versus Scott Baugh. Scott Baugh ran against Katie Porter and lost by a couple points in 2022. Dave Min is not a great candidate for Democrats. I think they kind of shot themselves in the foot running him here. But, I think he will win. This is a Biden plus 13 district, and it's left trending, unlike, say, California 22 up here. That'll be enough for Democrats to hold on. But at the same time, I do expect them to lose to Michelle Steele narrowly. Michelle Steele, again, in the 45th district against Derek Tran, has a couple of leads. She was down in the nonpartisan poll from the UCs, but she's up in her latest poll by 4, which is a pretty good margin. And again, she's the incumbent here. Trump will likely do well enough to allow room for Michelle Steele to overperform and win this election. So that's where we're going to have it at this point in time. Now, Republicans, I think, are going to get kind of unlucky in both or in California 27. Mike Garcia might actually be losing this time around. In 2022, he actually had some good polling leads because he was able to outraise Christy Smith, the Democrat, in this seat. But again, George Whitesides has self-funded himself. He's run a strong campaign, and in the latest poll, he's up by 2. Garcia, it's a Biden plus 13 seat. He's a good incumbent, but how much can you do again as a Republican in a Biden plus 13 seat? And Harris is likely to win this district by a similar amount too. It's, if not even more. So ticket splitting is going to really benefit Republicans here, but it won't be enough. So California 41, this is a flip that I'm going to actually be predicting for the first time. Will Rollins, I'm going to give him the win just because I've thought a little bit more about it. And we've gotten some pretty good polling for him. Again, RMG came out in September and had him up by 6. We do have some, polls that show ties, actually a slight edge to Calvert in the UC poll. But again, we have an even poll from GSG, so it's kind of a wash to me on the polling factor. The reason I think that it's pretty simple. The reason that I think that Will Rollins is going to win is because the seat is left trending. Ken Calvert compared to, again, the thing with California 2022 is that Republicans won all of these competitive districts in the governorship race, or in the governor's race and in the Senate race, but Republican House candidates didn't outperform by a lot. It'd be one thing if, say, I'm blanking on the name of the Republican, Brian Dahle, who ran for the governor of California against Gavin Newsom in 2022. It'd be one thing if Dolly won by 2% in the district and Will Rollins won by 10. Dolly won by like 7 or 8 or 9, and Ken Calvert won by 4. So not too great of a sign there for Republicans that they couldn't outrun in 2022, and that's to me why Rollins is going to lose this time. It's going to be incredibly close, but not Rollins. It's like Calvert's going to lose this time. It's going to be incredibly close, but Rollins has more money than he did last time. Democrats going to do a bit better at the top of the ticket, and that'll be enough for Rollins to have the win here. Now, we'll ask Mary Peltola. I'm also going to give her the win. So again, Democrats are going to be your House majority by the slimmest of margins. I mean, this is going to be so close, guys. But just to talk about Alaska, just the polls have been really good for Peltola. I mean, literally in all the nonpartisan polls, she's up by good amounts, right? Like DFP nonpartisan, she's up by 8. We actually had from December of last year, we had a GOP poll had her up by 14. The recent polls have showed a closer race with Begich actually leading in his latest poll, but again, it's an internal, and Alaska is a hard state to poll in general. So the reason that I think he's going to win is because the primary was so good for Peltola, and she got over half the vote in the primary, so she literally just would have won. She got an outright majority. It's not like she needs Republicans to come home for her. So that's why I think right now she's clearly the favorite in this race, and a lot of people are moving it back to the Republicans, but the primary showed that Peltola is pretty well liked here. So let me know what you all think. Again, this was a long video. These videos always run super long, so my apologies for that. But again, let me know what you all think. Let me know who you're expecting to win the House this year. It's going to be so close, so any opinion is valid. With that being said, I'll see you all in the next one.